In this video, we will be reviewing for the evaluation 2. In the first set, you'll be solving equations, showing your steps, and then plugging it back in to verify the answer. In the first one, because we're multiplying 7 times t, to undo multiplication, you want to divide by 7 on both sides of the equation. A negative divided by a positive is a negative. 56 divided by 7 is 8. 7 divided by 7 is 1, so we have 1t, and that's what we want. So now we've solved the equation. Plug it back in to show that it works. Negative 56 is equal to 7 times negative 8, and that checks out. In the next one, we have k minus 34. We want to solve for k, so we want to do the opposite operation, which is to add. So we add 34 to both sides of the equation. This is 0, so k plus 0 is k. Then we're going to do 34 added to negative 19. Which is the same as 34 minus 19. So since I'm not using a calculator, I'm going to borrow from the 3, make it a 2, make this 14. 14 take away 9 is 5. 2 take away 1 is 1. So my answer for k is 15. Then I go back and I check it by plugging it in. 15 take away 34, and I show that that does equal negative 19. In this one, the opposite of t is 19. Well, this opposite here is like a negative 1 coefficient. So I divide both sides of the equation by that negative 1 coefficient. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. So I have positive t is equal to, and then this would work out to be negative 19. Then I check it. The opposite of t, which is now negative 19, is equal to 19. So the opposite of a negative is a positive. In this one, I've got variables on both sides of the equation. So I want to get all of my variables on one side, all of my numbers on the other. So I'm going to remove 4n from this side of the equation. Whatever I do on one side of the equation, I do the same thing on the other. So I'm left with negative 8 equals 6n plus 28. Now I'm trying to get the variable by itself, so I need to subtract 28 from both sides. Negative 8 take away 28 is the same as adding these two up and attaching a negative. So that's negative 36 equals 6 times n. To cancel the multiplication or to eliminate the 6, we do division. So 6 divided by 6 is 1. A negative divided by a positive is a negative. Negative 6 is equal to n. This takes a little bit more work to plug it back in. So 4 times negative 6 minus 8 equals 10 times negative 6 plus 28. So this is negative 24 minus 8 equals negative 60 plus 28. This is negative 32 equals negative 32. So it checks. In the next one, I need to use the distributive property. So this is going to be 6v minus 24 equals 15. And then I'm going to change this subtraction to adding the opposite. Distribute that. So it's negative 2v minus 14. Then before I can start to solve, I need to collect like terms. So I'm going to, on the same side of the equation, the right side of the equation, here's my equal sign, I'm just going to put these together into one term. 15 take away 14 is 1. So I have 1 plus negative 2v on the right side. Now that everything is simplified or cleaned up, I'm ready to solve. I'm going to add 2v, because it's negative, to both sides of the equation. So that's 8v minus 24 equals 1. Then I need to get all my numbers onto this side of the equation and get the variable by itself. So I do the opposite. I add 24 to both sides. So 8v equals 25. I divide by 8. 25 divided by 8 doesn't work out nicely. So I'm going to leave it as a fraction. I'm going to say that my answer is 25/8. No need to change it to a decimal or even a mixed number. Plugging it back in is a bit more challenging. I'm going to, everywhere I see the v, I need to plug in 25/8. So I rewrite the equation, plugging in 25/8 where the v is, 25/8 plus 7. All right, then when I have subtraction of fractions, I need to get a like denominator. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 8. So this becomes 25/8 minus 32/8. So 32/8 is equivalent to 4. Then this becomes negative 7/8. Once I get the denominator to match, I just have to subtract the numerators. Then when I multiply a whole number by a fraction, I just need to multiply the 6 times the numerator. So it's negative 42/8. Now let's see what we get over here. I need to get a common denominator of 8, so I multiply top and bottom by 8. This is going to be 25/8 plus 56/8. Add those up, that's going to be 81/8. So I have 15 minus 2 times 81/8. 2 times 81 is 162/8. Bring down the minus. All right, now I'll just get a common denominator over here, multiply by 8. This is going to be 120. 120/8 minus 62/8 is in fact negative 42/8, so it checks out. In this problem, I just need to subtract the 9 from both sides of the equation. So I get 7x equals 28. Then I need to divide by the 7. 7 divided by 7 is 1, so x equals 4. I'm going to circle or box my final answer. Then I go back and I plug it back in for x to check it. Is 7 times 4 plus 9 equal to 37? Is 28 plus 9 equal to 37? Yes, it is. All right, write each English expression as an algebraic expression. 8 more than 6 times a number. 5 less than 4 times a number. Now notice with less than, that means subtracted from. The order of subtraction does matter, so it must be in this order, 4n minus 5. So 5 less than means take it off the end. The product of a number and negative 9. Now product means multiplication. Multiplication, the order does not matter. However, we don't write n times negative 9. That's usually not simplified. So we usually put the coefficient first, followed by the variable. Twice a number means 2 times a number. The quotient of 10 and a number. Means 10 divided by n. The order does matter for division. So that takes care of page 1. Represent the following fraction on a number line. So you need to make a number line. And I'm going to put in 0, and I'm going to put in 1, and I'm going to put in -1. Now, -2/9 is in between 0 and -1. In fact, if I were to divide this segment into 9 equal parts, I would be going 2 parts away from 0 out of 9 parts. So I'm going to be closer to 0. And this isn't super accurate, but the point is, don't put it in the middle, don't put it close to -1. It should clearly be closer to 0 than it is to -1. Which numbers are prime and which numbers are composite, and why? Well, a prime number only has 2 factors, 1 in itself. So 17 is prime because the only way to get 17 is 17 times 1. 11 is prime because the only way to get 11 is 11 times 1. The other numbers are composite because they have other factors. For example, 35 is 7 times 5. 9 is 3 times 3. 18 is 6 times 3 or 9 times 2. 24 can be 12 times 2 or 8 times 3 or 6 times 4. There are a lot of other factors, so these are called composite. Find the prime factorization of 98. So the first thing I would do is divide by 2 because it's an even number. When I divide by 2, and you might have to do the long division on this, 2 goes into 9 4 times. 4 times 2 is 8. Subtract, bring down the 8. 2 goes into 18 9 times. In other words, 9 times 2 is 18. So 2 times 49. Then 49 breaks down into 7 times 7. So my prime factorization for 98 is 2 times 7 times 7. Putting this fraction into lowest terms, I want to list the prime factors. So 16 is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. 64 is going to be 2 times 2, that's 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, times 2 is 32, times 2 is 64. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 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 The only thing left in the numerator is 1 times 1 times 1 times 1. In the denominator, 4. So my answer is 1/4. Multiply and put the answer in lowest terms. So first of all, a negative times a positive is always a negative. And when I multiply fractions, I multiply the numerators and I multiply the denominators. But before I go and do this, I'm going to notice that there may be some things that I can already put into lowest terms. So what I can do is, the numerator is already broken down into the prime factors. I'm going to break the denominator down into the prime factors. So 8 is 2 times 2 times 2. 15 is 3 times 5. Now, 5 divided by 5 is 1. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So I've got negative 1 times 1. And then in the denominator, I have 2 times 2, which is 4, times 3, which is 12. When I'm adding fractions, I want to have the same denominator. So once the denominator matches, just rewrite it. And then I've got 3 out of 14 plus 9 out of 14. So altogether, I've got 12 14ths. You should always put fractions into lowest terms, however. So 12 14ths, you can break the 12 down into 2 times 2 times 3. 14 is 2 times 7. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 2 times 1 times 3, 6 sevenths. That's my final answer. Always put fractions in the lowest terms. In this problem, I don't have the same denominator, so I'm going to need to make that happen. So I multiply the top and the bottom by 2. So now I have 4 14ths plus 3 14ths. Altogether, that gives me 7 14ths. And when I put that into lowest terms, 14 is 7 times 2. 7 divided by 7 is 1. I get 1/2. 7 out of 14 is the same as 1/2. In this case, I've got variables, so I want to get the same denominator because I'm adding. So multiply top and bottom by 5 here. Multiply top and bottom by 4x here. So I have 4x times 3. That's 12x. Over 4x times 5, that's 20x. 1 times 5 is 5. And then, of course, 4x times 5 is 20x. Now, when I add the numerators, I have 12x plus 5, and that's all we can do. We can't collect that because those are unlike terms. We leave it like that, over 20x. So just rewrite the denominator once it matches. Writing this as an improper fraction, 9 times 7 is 63 plus 2. So that's 65 ninths. Whatever the denominator is here, it should also be here. All right, moving on to page 3. To write as a mixed number, we want to take 54 divided by 7. 7 goes into 54 7 times. 7 times 7 is 49. Subtract. This is 14, take away 9, which is 5. So it is 7 whole, and the remainder is how many out of 7 you have left over. So that's your mixed number. Fill in the blank to compare fractions. First, we need to get the denominators to match. So I'm going to multiply by 2 on the top and on the bottom. So this becomes 18 28ths. Well, 18 out of 28 is larger than 15 out of 28, so it should go that way. Evaluate and leave the answer as a fraction. 1/5 times itself 4 times. So the exponent tells us how many times we're going to write out this number and multiply it. When multiplying fractions, just multiply the numerators and then multiply the denominators. 25 times 5 is 125. 125 times 5 is 625. Simplify and leave the answer as a fraction. So order of operations tells me to do what's in parentheses first. And I cannot divide fractions. Instead, I need to change the division to multiplication by the reciprocal, because multiplication and division are what we call inverse operations. So I take the inverse of this and I take the inverse of this. So this is going to be negative 15 over, and 18 times 8. Well, actually, I might not want to do that because that's a large number. So let's break it down instead. Let's break down the 18 into 2 times 3 times 3. Then the 8 we can break down into 2 times 2 times 2. We're looking for common factors. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So that's going to make it easier than doing 18 times 8 and getting a really big number. So instead of 15 in the numerator here, I'm going to have the negative 5. So negative 5 over 2 times 3 is 6, times 2 is 12, times 2 is 24, times 2 is 48. So that's what I get here. Bring this down here. And I've got a subtraction here. Now, subtracting. The definition of subtraction is that subtracting a number is the same as adding its opposite. So this actually becomes an addition problem. 1/9 plus 5/48. And we're going to need to get a common denominator. And the way that we can do that is break these down into their prime factors. So that's 3 times 3. That's going to be 3 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So they both have the 3. So we're good there. But now notice this one needs another 3. So I'm going to have to multiply top and bottom by 3. This one has 2 3s, but it needs all of these 2's, which this is going to be 16. So this is 16, this is 16. So this is 16 over 144. 16 times 9 is 144. 5 times 3 is 15, also over 144. And now we add the numerators. 16 plus 15 is 31 over 144. And then in the last problem, to solve this equation, I need to get rid of the coefficient. I just want n. I don't want negative 2/9 times n. So I'm going to multiply both sides of the equation by the reciprocal, which is negative 9/2. Multiply by negative 9/2. So this is 1n. This is 36 times negative 9 divided by 2. Well, rather than doing this and getting a really big number, I'm going to do 36 divided by 2, which is 18. Then 18 times negative 9, this is just 1, and division by 1, we don't have to worry about, it's the same thing. So now I'm going to multiply 18 times 9. So 8 times 9 is 72. So we're going to put down the 2, carry the 7. 1 times 9 plus 7, that's 162, but remember this was negative, and a positive times a negative is a negative. So the answer is negative 162, and I want to plug it back in to make sure it works. So negative 2/9 times negative 162, does that equal 36? Well, a negative times a negative is a positive, and you can do this in more than one way. 2 times 162, you can do 162 times 2, that's 4. 6 times 2 is 12, carry the 1. 2 plus 1 is 3. So I have 324 divided by 9 equals 36, and you can check that with your long division. 324 divided by 9, 9 goes into 32 3 times. 3 times 9 is 27, subtract, that gives you a difference of 5, bring down the 4, 9 goes into 54 6 times, so it checks out.